Good evening, gentlemen. I'm going to talk to you on something very important today. Very important in the sense going to be a general talk, but I'm going to show it to you how the world is inexorably moving towards the destruction of Western civilization and the Third World War. It looks a little far fetched. Many will not believe me, but let us look at it. I will draw your attention to the last conference which was held in Madrid by NATO. That was in 22. In that conference, the United States had its way, and for the first time they mentioned China in that conference. That means NATO took note of China as a geostationary power in Eastern Asia, and they felt that this power must be countered. That's the first thing. Second, it proved that the Americans have now complete hegemony over Europe, and they have about 300,000 troops of NATO under their control. Even there is an application of Finland and Sweden to join NATO. Probably at some stage they will. Now, in the world, there are only three global powers as it stands. The first, of course, the United States of America, second is Russia, and third is China. Now, ever since there's been a Russia China alliance, the Americans have been perturbed and they have been shoring up their defenses. What they have done, as I've already told you, they had the Madrid conference of NATO, and the purpose was very simple. They wanted to consolidate NATO as a force. NATO, which was supposed to be meant only for Europe, is now global. That's the first point. How far it's going to be effective is another point. The second point is the Americans have been playing host to India for more of things. They are feeding India with a paranoid fear of China. And the Modi government has gone into a spin along with the United States. They have got 4 military cooperation pacts signed with America, though India is not an ally of the United States or a member of NATO, yet India features in the American plan. And this is what worries China. China is worried about India the same way the Russians were worried about Ukraine. Now, mark my words very carefully what I'm saying. Ukraine was built up by the Americans as a counterweight to crush Russian global ambitions and power so that America could remain supreme. But it didn't work out that way. It became an existentialist crisis for Russia, and the invasion of Ukraine took place. The battle is still on. And the Americans are almost having their way because they are bleeding Russia. At the same time, they are creating a fear psychosis about Russia in Europe, and all Europe is united against Russia. They've even expelled Russia from the Council of Europe. The next thing which Americans realized is the power of China. China is a little different kettle of fish because it's the major trading power for 130 countries and the biggest trading partner with America. Now, no other country can match or even face up to China, and so the Americans have thought that we can entice India against China. It's like enticing Ukraine against Russia. This is what the Americans are trying to entice India against China. And this could be one of the ingredients for a war because India is a growing power, though it's riding piggy bank on the American military might, but the Americans would use India as a fodder against China. That is the point. And if you look at the other Asian countries, Japan is also militarizing. They've forgotten their Pacific pacifist constitution, thrown it into the Pacific Ocean. South Korea is worried, and now the Philippines have given four more bases to the Americans. So China is getting ingrained. The American perception is very clear that they would like to dominate the world for the next 100 to 200 years. Nobody knows what's going to happen after that, but at least for the next century, America wants to be the number one power, and it has to deal with two global powers, and that is Russia and China. Russia, the plan is already afoot, as you can see. The battle in Ukraine is continuing, and the Russians are not having everything their way. They're making headway, but they're bleeding also. That's the point. China is the next giant, and here the case is a little different. The Chinese economy is as good as the Americans, and earlier the Americans had offered China joint ownership or leadership of the world, with China playing a junior partner. This didn't happen because China was not interested in it, because China itself got a civilization of almost 4,000 years much ahead of America, and they're not going to agree to this. So the question is, what next? The American plan, I can tell you what it is: bleed Russia, maybe try to finish it off as a global power, as a global powerhouse, military power, and now their next attempt is to finish off China. And for that reason, they like to use India as the border against China. I think the Indian government should be very careful about it. And I personally feel that our foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar, has realized the gravity of the situation. The Indians have taken over the onus of patrolling the Indian Ocean. Joint patrols are going on with the Americans and the Australians navies, and China is not liking it. Another thing is that India doesn't want to provoke China, yes, but they are playing into the hands of the Americans. Now, that part also we must bear in mind. So you can see how the picture is forming. America has an axe to grind. It wants to see that both China and Russia are no longer a threat to the United States supremacy for the next 100 years. And China perhaps has realized it. But at the same time, in the American plan, they have got NATO on their side, almost 300,000 troops, weaponry, and all, and NATO is now a global group force. They have mentioned China in the Madrid Declaration, and then they have the peripheral nations around China, starting with India, the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea. And of course, not forgetting Taiwan. The Americans are playing their cards very carefully, and the visit by Nancy Pelosi, the earlier speaker, to Taiwan was not a flash in the pan, like the Americans were saying, that we can't stop the speaker from going there. No, sir. It was a concerted plan to give a warning to China that, look, we're not going to give up anything to you. America is now getting ready for a conflict with China. That is also a fact. And in that conflict, they have got their line of thought that India will be part of their scheme of things. India is a growing power, but it doesn't militarily become a global power because most of the Indian military equipment is imported. It's riding piggy bang on the Americans or the Russian equipment. There's nothing which is made in India. China is different. Economically, also, India is not a match to China, but China is now the second biggest economy in the world, and I think we can add another decade more, or maybe even less, they will overtake America, and then the Americans' goose will be cooked. They don't want that. America would like a short clash with China where they can use their superior military power and technology, and for that they will need the help of Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Formosa, even North Vietnam, and of course India as fodder house. The American think tank. Now, I have been told by an American. I wouldn't like to mention about him, but the fact is, this is what the American plan is: get along NATO as a global power, try to finish up Russia, at the same time cage China, emasculate it, try to finish their Belt and Road scheme, and try to see that Chinese economy doesn't move forward, and at the same time ring China with hostile countries from India to South Korea. Now, if that is the game, the Americans so far appear to be successful. But there's an old saying, if you remember, there's many a slip between the cup and the lip. What Biden and party have not really realized is that all you need is a matchstick, and all the American plans of hegemony for the next 100 years will just evaporate, go away. How is that? That could be a nuclear war. I do not see how America can escape a nuclear war with the type of policy they are following. The Indian government has to be more circumspect in dealing with China. I don't know whether they'll understand it or no, but Jai Shankar has to realize, and including Narendra Modi, that the border settlement with China is of paramount importance. And let's accept the fact, the Indian state should accept the fact that we had no control over Aksai Chin historically for the last 1,000 years. So you might as well just hand it over. Stop showing your maps which show that Aksai Chin is a part of India. Forget about it. And then negotiate on NEFA and try to revive the old agreement which had been offered by Chow and Lai when visited Delhi and said that he will recognize the McMahon line in return for the Indians accepting Aksai Chin and certain portions of Ladakh as part of China. It is not accepted by Nehru, I don't know why, and not accepted even later. So now the situation which we are coming to is that India could be sucked into the vortex of a war the way the Americans are going about it. I don't think in history, for the last 10 years, the number of troops in the Chinese opposition has been so many, it never happened before. Even the Indians have now positioned more than 50,000 troops on the border with China, but it's not going to be an easy battle. A conventional war, maybe, maybe not, but a conventional war could suddenly erupt and become a nuclear war. And all the American plans of ringing Russia and China and keeping them caged for the next 100 years and see that Americans have the hegemony or global hegemony may not bear fruit. I think one should be a realistic person, and I wonder the American general staff what they are thinking. They are scared of China, no doubt about it, and they don't want a military clash with China where they are fighting China all alone. They want to fight China with a paraphernalia of allies, Japan, South Korea, and all that. Now, and these small countries, South Korea, Formosa, don't realize that towing the American line all the way may lead them to doom. The Indians have played into the hands of the Americans. If you remember, there was an agreement signed between China's foreign minister, India's foreign minister in Moscow, just after the Galwan clash, and where India gave a lot of weightage to the Chinese. Narendra Modi even made a statement after that no Indian territory has been taken over by China. This was basically to placate China. But at the same time, at that time, India went ahead with its alliance with the Americans. It's not an alliance on paper, but there is no doubt that India signed four military agreements and is part of the Quad. Quad is not a military pact now, but it can be resuscitated or set up anytime into a converted to a military pact. So all these things portend show that India is being sucked into the vortex of a world conflict. Now what happens is everything is not by the book. There could be many slips, and one of those slips is the desperation of the Russians and the Chinese when they realize that they have been conned by the Americans and they use nuclear weapons. And that is not something which is beyond the realm of logic. It's not a fantasy, it's something which could happen, and that would be Armageddon. The world, gentlemen, is in a very precarious situation. I have given you the global situation at the moment as it stands. The United States has got a certain plan, and there is no doubt about it that they have almost 800 bases, I think, all over the world, and almost 200,000 troops spread out globally. So they are the only global power, the unipolar power, and they want to remain that way. They don't want to share the sun with Russia and China, which are the other Joe world powers. So the idea is to finish these powers. The plan for Russia is already on, and now there's the plan for China, and India and the other countries in Southeast Asia will have to beware they don't fall into the trap of the Americans and get involved into conflict with China. America may not come face to face with China like it is not coming face to face with Russia and Ukraine, but they'll supply weapons and support and keep the pot boiling, and that would be the American plan. But that can have, as I told you, a double-edged sword like the English broadsword, two edges, and that will be disastrous for America. I don't know, I'm not a soothsayer who can look into the future what's going to happen, but I'm pretty clear in my mind that whatever the American think tank is thinking is not honky-dory, is not the best way to go about things. And it is better to recognize the geopolitical importance of Russia and China and look out for detente, like it was during the time of Brezhnev and Reagan. But unfortunately, the horses are bolted. Things are moving inexorably forward. There's a Ukraine war on. China is getting restive in the South China Sea. India is building up its forces thanks to the Americans. So all this portends a very dangerous future and Armageddon. I do not know who will win or who will lose. You can't say at this stage. But whoever wins would be classified as the good, and whoever loses would be the evil. Gentlemen, I close now. The world in a very precarious position, and all of us hope that things don't become worse. I hope sanity prevails and a workable peace can be worked out. But the way things are going, it's not likely. Thank you, gentlemen. I close now and say, Jai Hind. God bless you all. Do subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends, talk about it, discuss it. I'll be mighty pleased if you do that. Thank you and goodbye and take care. Till we meet again.